I was setting the table in my modest one-bedroom apartment when Jake's family arrived for dinner. The space was small, I knew that. But it was mine. I'd worked 2 jobs for 3 years to afford the down payment. Every piece of furniture told a story of thrift stores and patience. Ryan, my brother-in-law, walked in first. He looked around slowly, his eyes scanning my carefully arranged living room. Then he laughed. Not a polite chuckle, but a full, mocking laugh that echoed off my walls. Wow, this is it? I've seen studio apartments bigger than this. The room went completely silent. My face burned with humiliation. Jake's mother looked uncomfortable. His father stared at his shoes. But Ryan just stood there grinning, proud of his joke. I forced a smile, my hands trembling slightly as I placed the last fork on the table. "Make yourselves comfortable," I managed to say, my voice barely steady. The evening had just started, and already I felt small in my own home. Ryan's wife, Chloe, giggled nervously behind her hand. "Well, at least it's cozy." The word hit me like a slap. Cozy. The universal code word for disappointingly small. I excused myself to the kitchen, pretending I needed to check on the roast. Through the doorway, I could still hear them settling into my thrifted dining chairs. Then Ryan's voice carried clearly into the kitchen. He wasn't even trying to whisper. "Honestly, Jake could do so much better. I mean, look at this place." My hands gripped the kitchen counter, knuckles white. Tears threatened to spill, but I blinked them back furiously. I'd spent all day preparing this meal, cleaning every corner, trying to make everything perfect. And within 5 minutes, Ryan had made me feel worthless in the home I'd worked so hard for. Jake said nothing in my defense. Nothing. I heard him laugh awkwardly and change the subject to football. The silence where his support should have been hurt almost as much as Ryan's cruelty. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and carried the roast to the table with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. After everyone left, I sat on my couch staring at the wall. Jake was washing dishes in the kitchen, humming like nothing had happened. "That was rough," I finally said. He turned, drying a plate. "What was?" My jaw dropped. "Your brother. Everything he said about my apartment." Jake sighed, setting the plate down. "You know how Ryan is. He didn't mean anything by it. He just jokes around." I stood up, anger replacing the hurt. "He always means it, Jake. Every single dig, every comment, every comparison. He looks down on me because I don't have his money or his lifestyle." Jake walked over, trying to hug me. "Come on, don't let him get to you. This apartment is fine. Fine. Not wonderful, not impressive, not something to be proud of. Just fine." I pulled away and looked around my small space. The second-hand couch I'd reupholstered myself. The bookshelf I'd built from scratch. The photographs I'd framed. This wasn't just an apartment. It was my achievement, my independence, my proof that I could make something from nothing. And Ryan had reduced it to a punchline. Lying in bed that night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept drifting back through the years, remembering how I'd gotten here. I grew up in a tiny trailer park outside the city. My mother worked 3 jobs just to keep us fed. I wore second-hand clothes to school and packed lunch in reused grocery bags. Kids like Ryan, born into money and privilege, never understood what it meant to truly work for something. While I was studying for college on a scholarship and working overnight shifts at a diner, Ryan was probably partying at some expensive resort his father paid for. His first car was a BMW, a graduation gift. His first condo was purchased outright by his family. Everything in his life had been handed to him on a silver platter. I'd clawed my way to where I was, saving every dollar, sacrificing sleep and social life. This apartment represented 7 years of relentless work. 20 square feet might seem small to someone like Ryan, but to me, every inch was sacred. It was proof that I'd made it out, that I'd built something real. And nobody, not even my arrogant brother-in-law, could take that away from me. 3 weeks later, my boss called me into her office. Emily, that rebranding project you did for the Riverside Mall? The client loved it. She slid a folder across her desk. A real estate investment group saw your work. They want you to handle their entire marketing expansion. My heart raced. This was huge. The portfolio was impressive, a growing company acquiring rental properties across the city. They're looking for fresh branding, website redesign, tenant communication materials, the whole package, my boss continued. And Emily, they're willing to pay premium rates. I opened the folder, scanning through the details. Summit Property Group. They managed mid-range apartment buildings, exactly the kind of properties working professionals like me could afford. The contract was substantial, more money than I'd made on any single project. I accepted immediately, my mind already buzzing with ideas. I had no idea this decision would change everything. No idea that this project would lead to the most satisfying moment of my entire life. That night, I worked until 3 in the morning, sketching logos and brainstorming concepts, feeling more energized than I had in months. The following Saturday, Jake's family hosted a barbecue. I didn't want to go, but Jake insisted we needed to show up for family. Ryan was holding court by the grill, beer in hand, talking loudly about his latest success. So we're moving next month, he announced to anyone who'd listen. 2-bedroom luxury apartment downtown. Marble countertops, floor-to-ceiling windows, rooftop pool. Real success, you know. His eyes found mine across the patio. Emily, you should really stop wasting time with your little art projects and learn about real estate investing like me. That's where actual money is. The group went quiet again, waiting for my reaction. But something had shifted inside me. Maybe it was the new project giving me confidence. Maybe I was just tired of being his punching bag. Either way, I didn't feel the usual sting of humiliation. Instead, I smiled calmly and took a sip of my lemonade. That sounds wonderful, Ryan. I hope the move goes smoothly. He looked almost disappointed that I hadn't reacted. Jake squeezed my hand, probably relieved I hadn't started an argument. But inside, I felt different. Stronger. Like I was done letting Ryan's words affect me. My meetings with Summit Property Group went incredibly well. The owners, Patricia and David Chen, were a married couple in their 50s who'd built their business from a single building 20 years ago. They loved my designs and appreciated my understanding of what tenants actually wanted. Emily, you get it, Patricia said during our 3rd meeting. You understand the market because you live it. After presenting my final branding package, David leaned back in his chair. We're impressed. Very impressed. Would you consider something beyond freelance work? My heart skipped. What do you mean? Patricia smiled. We're expanding aggressively this year. We could use fresh perspectives on the investment side. Would you be interested in a small partnership stake? 20% equity in exchange for your creative direction and some capital investment. I nearly dropped my coffee. 20% of a property company? How much capital? I asked carefully. David named a figure that was exactly my entire savings account. Every penny I'd been hoarding for years. It was terrifying. It was risky. It was possibly the smartest opportunity I'd ever get. I'll do it, I heard myself say. 3 days later, I signed the papers. I was now part owner of a real estate investment company. For the next few months, I threw myself into the work. I attended property viewings, learned about market analysis, studied tenant laws and building management. My designs helped Summit Property Group stand out in a crowded market. We attracted quality tenants and maintained high occupancy rates. Then one Tuesday morning, Patricia called me into her office. We've just closed on 3 new buildings, she said, sliding acquisition documents across her desk. I wanted you to see them first since you're now an owner. I flipped through the paperwork, noting locations and unit counts. Then I froze. The 3rd building's address made my breath catch. Riverside Luxury Apartments. downtown. Recently renovated. 2-bedroom units with marble countertops and floor-to-ceiling windows. The exact building Ryan had been bragging about for months. The same complex he'd mentioned at every family gathering. The apartment he'd used as another example of his superiority over me. I checked the ownership documents again, my hands trembling. There it was. Summit Property Group, LLC. Owners listed, Patricia Chen, David Chen, Emily Parker. My name. Right there in black and white. I owned Ryan's new apartment building. The next family dinner was at Jake's parents' house. I wore my best dress and actually looked forward to attending. Ryan arrived late, making his usual grand entrance. "Sorry we're behind," he announced loudly. "We've been busy with the move. Our new place is absolutely incredible." He pulled out his phone, forcing everyone to look at photos. "Look at that view. Look at those finishes. This is what success looks like, people." He walked over to where I was helping set the table. "Hey Emily, maybe sometime I'll invite you over so you can see what real living looks like. You know, give you some inspiration." Chloe giggled beside him. "It's so much bigger than most places." I set down the napkins I'd been folding and smiled sweetly. "That sounds lovely, Ryan. I'd love to see how you're settling in." He looked slightly confused by my pleasant response, clearly expecting embarrassment or envy. "Well, you'll have to wait a bit. We're still unpacking." "Take your time," I said calmly. "I'm sure it's a beautiful building." Under the table, Jake squeezed my knee, probably wondering why I was being so agreeable. I just kept smiling, hugging my secret close. The satisfaction was delicious. The following Monday, I confirmed everything with Patricia and David. Yes, the Riverside Luxury Apartments lease went through our management branch, Patricia confirmed. The tenant, Ryan Williams, signed a 1-year lease last week. Standard terms, first and last month's rent, security deposit. I stared at the documents in front of me. Ryan's signature on the lease agreement. The monthly rent amount that would flow through our company's accounts. My name on the ownership paperwork. "Any issues with the tenant?" David asked casually. "No," I said quickly. "Just making sure I understand all our properties." That night, I sat in my tiny apartment with a glass of wine, processing the shift. For months, Ryan had made me feel inferior. He'd mocked my home, dismissed my career, treated me like I was beneath him. Now, without even knowing it, he was paying rent to me. Every month, his money would flow into a company I partly owned. Every complaint, request, or issue would potentially cross my desk. The power dynamic had completely flipped, and he had no idea. I didn't plan to tell him immediately. Sometimes, the best revenge is patience. Let him live in his ignorance just a little longer. Let him enjoy his false sense of superiority before reality caught up. 2 weeks later, Summit Property Group sent an email to all Riverside residents announcing a meet and greet with the new ownership team. Patricia asked if I'd attend as part of our public relations strategy. "It'll be good for tenants to meet the team," she said. "Makes the company feel more personal." I agreed, probably too quickly. The event was scheduled for Saturday afternoon in the building's lobby. I wore professional clothes, blazer, slacks, our company name badge. Patricia and David handled most conversations while I stood nearby with information packets and a friendly smile. That's when Ryan walked in. He was carrying boxes, probably still moving things in. He glanced toward our table, did a double take, and froze completely. His face went pale. The box in his hands slipped slightly before he caught it. I watched him process what he was seeing, me, standing behind a table with the Summit Property Group logo, wearing a name badge identifying me as part of the ownership team. "Welcome to the property, Mr. Williams," I said calmly, my voice professional and pleasant. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Chloe appeared beside him, oblivious to his shock. "Oh, how nice. Are you the new landlords?" "Part of the ownership group, yes," I replied, handing her an information packet. "We're excited to be part of this building's future." Ryan cornered me by the elevator after the event ended. "What are you doing here?" His voice was tight, confused, almost angry. I tilted my head innocently. "I work with the ownership group. Didn't you see my name badge? This is your company?" He looked like he might be sick. "Partly," I said, keeping my tone light and professional. "I handle the creative direction and help with property decisions. Patricia and David are the primary owners, but I have an equity stake." He stared at me like I'd grown a second head. This didn't fit his mental image of me, the struggling graphic designer living in a tiny apartment, the woman beneath his notice. "Since when do you know anything about real estate?" he finally asked. I smiled. "Since I stopped listening to people who underestimated me. Your apartment is beautiful, by all accounts. I hope you're settling in well." I walked away before he could respond, feeling his stunned gaze on my back. The elevator doors closed, and I finally let myself grin. That moment, watching his smugness crack and crumble, was worth every dollar I'd invested. Patricia noticed my expression when I returned to the lobby. "Everything okay?" "Perfect," I said. "Everything is absolutely perfect." 3 weeks later, all Riverside tenants received a notice about a rent adjustment. Market analysis showed the building was slightly underpriced for its amenities and location. The increase was modest, only $75 per month, but it was standard practice for new ownership. Ryan stormed into the property management office the next day. I wasn't there, but our property manager, Sandra, told me everything. He demanded to know why his rent was increasing, Sandra reported, trying not to smile. He said he'd just signed the lease and this wasn't fair. He wanted to speak to the owners immediately. "What did you tell him?" I asked. "That all rent adjustments are approved by the ownership board and based on comprehensive market analysis." I mentioned that Mrs. Emily Parker, one of the owners, had personally reviewed all the numbers. Sandra paused. He went completely silent. Then asked if you were Emily Parker married to Jake Parker. I confirmed. He left without another word. That evening, my phone buzzed with a text from Jake. "Ryan's upset about something with your property company? What's going on?" I replied simply, "Just standard business procedures. Nothing personal." But it was absolutely personal. And we both knew it. The family group chat exploded that week. Ryan started posting messages about how some people were abusing family connections for business. He implied I'd somehow tricked him into signing his lease. "Can't trust anyone these days," he wrote. "Even family will take advantage of you." Jake's sister, Maria, responded, "What are you talking about?" Ryan didn't answer directly, just kept posting vague complaints about dishonest business practices. Finally, Jake had enough. "If you have something to say about Emily, say it directly. She's worked incredibly hard for everything she has. Stop the passive-aggressive nonsense." I stared at my phone, tears forming in my eyes. For months, Jake had stayed silent during Ryan's mockery. He'd asked me to ignore it, to keep the peace, to let things go. But now, finally, he was standing up for me. The chat went quiet. No one responded to Jake's message. Later that night, Jake hugged me tight. "I should have defended you sooner. I'm sorry I let him treat you that way." "You're defending me now," I whispered. "That's what matters." It felt like our marriage had found new strength. Like we'd finally become true partners instead of me fighting battles alone while he stayed neutral. The complaints about Ryan started accumulating. Noise violations from loud parties. 3 instances in 1 month. Other tenants reported disruptions past midnight on weeknights. Our property management company followed standard protocol, a written warning after the 3rd complaint. I saw the notice cross my email for approval before it went out. Ryan Williams, Unit 507. Violation of lease terms regarding noise ordinances. Please be advised that continued violations may result in lease termination. The notice required an owner's signature. Patricia had already signed. The system automatically routed it to me next. I stared at my name typed at the bottom, Emily Parker, co-owner, Summit Property Group, LLC. One click, and my signature would appear on an official warning to my brother-in-law. I thought about all his comments. All the mockery. All the times he'd made me feel small. This wasn't revenge. This was business. He'd violated his lease terms. Any tenant would receive the same warning. I clicked the signature button. 2 days later, at a family brunch, Ryan confronted me directly. "You're really doing this to me? Sending me warnings like I'm some problem tenant?" The entire family turned to watch. "You violated your lease terms," I said calmly. "Multiple noise complaints from your neighbors. It's standard procedure for any tenant." His face reddened. "This is because I made jokes about your apartment." The brunch table went completely silent. Everyone stared at Ryan, then at me. I set down my coffee cup slowly. "Actually, Ryan, this has nothing to do with my apartment. You signed a lease with clear terms. You agreed to follow building rules. You've been violating those rules, and we responded according to standard procedures. You could have called me personally," he argued. "Given me a heads up as family. And showed preferential treatment based on family connections? That would be unethical." I kept my voice level. "Every tenant deserves equal treatment under their lease terms. Including you." Chloe shifted uncomfortably beside him. "Ryan, you didn't tell me we'd gotten multiple warnings." He shot her a look. "It wasn't multiple, 3 documented noise complaints," I interrupted. 3 separate incidents requiring police visits for noise ordinances. Jake's mother gasped. "Police visits?" Ryan's face went from red to purple. "You're enjoying this. This is your revenge for me calling your apartment small." I leaned forward slightly. "Ryan, I'm not seeking revenge. I'm running a business professionally. You happen to be a tenant. If you follow your lease terms, you'll have no issues. But this isn't personal, it's about respecting the rules you agreed to." The whole family watched him deflate, his righteous anger crumbling under the weight of facts. "Just business," I repeated softly. For the first time in our relationship, I had the power, and I was using it with more grace than he'd ever shown me. A month later, Ryan tried to break his lease early. He called the property management office claiming he needed to move for work reasons. Sandra forwarded me his request. "He wants to terminate his lease after only 3 months, she said. He's offering to forfeit his security deposit." I reviewed his lease agreement carefully. Standard 1-year term. Early termination clause clearly stated, tenant responsible for rent until unit is re-rented or until lease expiration, whichever comes first. Plus forfeit of security deposit. "What should I tell him?" Sandra asked. I thought about it. I could make this easy for him. Accept the security deposit, let him walk away, let him escape the daily reminder that he was paying rent to the woman he'd mocked. Or I could enforce the lease he'd legally signed. "Tell him the lease terms stand," I said. "If he wants to leave, he's responsible for fulfilling his obligations until we find a new tenant or the lease expires naturally." Ryan was trapped. Legally bound for 9 more months. Paying rent to me every single month. His pride must have been killing him. Part of me felt guilty. But then I remembered him laughing at my apartment, whispering that Jake could do better, mocking my career. This wasn't cruelty. It was consequences. Ryan's business started struggling around the same time. Jake mentioned it casually one evening. Ryan lost a major client. Some tech startup that was paying him huge consulting fees. They went with a cheaper firm. I looked up from my laptop. That's unfortunate. He's pretty stressed. Ask Dad for a loan to cover some expenses. My hands paused on the keyboard. Ryan, who'd always bragged about his success, who'd made me feel poor and unsuccessful, was now borrowing money from his parents. Did your dad help him? I asked. Jake shrugged. He gave him something. But Dad's retired. He can't just hand out huge amounts anymore. Later that night, I heard Jake on the phone with Ryan. Have you tried cutting unnecessary expenses? Maybe downsizing? Through the bedroom door, I could hear Ryan's angry voice through the speaker, though I couldn't make out words. I'm just trying to help, Jake said, sounding exhausted. When he hung up, he looked drained. I didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. Ryan's financial problems weren't my responsibility, and they certainly weren't caused by me. He'd built a lifestyle he couldn't actually afford, and now reality was catching up. Sometimes, karma doesn't need help. It just needs time. The arguments between Ryan and Chloe became obvious at family gatherings. They'd arrive separately, sit far apart, and barely speak to each other. At one dinner, Chloe pulled me aside in the kitchen. I'm sorry about how Ryan treated you, she said quietly. About your apartment, about everything. I should have said something. I was surprised by her apology. Thank you for saying that. He's under a lot of pressure, she continued. The business, the money, he's not handling it well. He blames you for the rent situation, but I know that's not fair. I chose my words carefully. The rent is market rate for that building. And the warnings were based on legitimate complaints from his neighbors. I know, she sighed. He just hates that he's paying rent to you. He feels humiliated. I understood that feeling intimately. I'd felt humiliated every time he mocked my home, my career, my life. But I kept my voice gentle. Life has a way of balancing things out. Chloe nodded sadly. Yeah. I'm learning that. Watching their relationship strain gave me no joy. I'd wanted Ryan to understand how his words affected people. I'd wanted him to face consequences. But I'd never wanted his marriage to suffer. That wasn't justice, it was just sad. Late one Thursday night, long after I'd gone to bed, someone knocked on my apartment door. Jake answered while I grabbed a robe. Through the bedroom door, I heard a familiar voice. Ryan. I walked into the living room. Ryan stood in my doorway, looking nothing like the arrogant man who'd mocked this space months ago. He looked tired, defeated, smaller somehow. I need to talk to Emily, he said quietly. Jake looked at me. I nodded. It's fine. Jake hesitated, then went to the bedroom, leaving the door slightly open. Ryan stood awkwardly in my small entryway, the same entryway he'd laughed at. I came to apologize, he said finally. For everything I said about your apartment, about your career, about you not being good enough for Jake. All of it. I crossed my arms, waiting. I was wrong, he continued, his voice cracking slightly. You worked for everything you have. You built something real. I mocked you because I couldn't stand that you were actually happy with less. Because deep down, I knew my success was hollow. Tears formed in his eyes. I've spent my whole life measuring success by money and status. And it's left me with nothing that matters. I felt my own eyes getting wet. This wasn't the apology I'd imagined. It was deeper, more honest, more painful for both of us. I gestured to my thrifted couch, the same one he'd silently judged. Sit down, Ryan. He sat, looking around my apartment with different eyes. No mockery now, just quiet observation. I sat across from him in my reading chair. You don't owe me an apology, Ryan. His head snapped up, surprised. You owe yourself something more important, respect. Real self-respect that doesn't come from tearing other people down or measuring your worth by your bank account. I leaned forward. You can't build a real life by making other people feel small. All you build is emptiness. You end up surrounding yourself with things instead of people, with status instead of connection. He wiped his eyes roughly. I've made such a mess of everything. Then unmake it, I said simply. Start being the person you actually want to be, not the person you think you should be. Money and apartments and luxury, none of that matters if you're miserable inside. We sat in silence for a moment. My tiny apartment suddenly felt bigger, warmer, more full of truth than any luxury penthouse. I don't hate you, Ryan, I said softly. I never did. I just wanted you to see me as human. As someone worthy of basic respect. He nodded slowly. I see you now. I really do. When he left 20 minutes later, something had shifted. Not forgiveness exactly, that would take time. But understanding. A beginning. Over the next few months, things slowly changed. Ryan started seeing a financial counselor, working through his debt and spending habits. Chloe told me privately that they were in couples therapy, trying to rebuild their relationship on honesty instead of image. At a family barbecue, I overheard Ryan talking to Jake's father. I'm thinking of downsizing to a one-bedroom. Something more affordable that fits my actual income, not what I pretend to earn. Jake's father responded approvingly. That's mature thinking, son. 2 weeks later, Sandra from property management called me. We have an inquiry about a one-bedroom unit in Riverside. The tenant is Ryan Williams, already in building. He wants to transfer to a smaller unit at lower rent. I reviewed the available units. We had one on the 3rd floor. Smaller, more modest, but still nice. Rent was $400 less than his current 2-bedroom. Approve the transfer, I told Sandra. Same lease terms, just adjusted for the new unit size. When Ryan moved to the smaller apartment, he thanked the office staff personally. Sandra told me he'd been polite, even friendly. He's changed, she said. He actually treats us like people now. It was a small redemption arc, but it felt genuine. Real growth is slow and uncomfortable. Ryan was learning that lesson the hard way. Thanksgiving dinner that year felt different. The family gathered at Jake's parents' house, but the tension that had marked previous gatherings was gone. When Ryan arrived with Chloe, he brought wine and actually helped set up tables without being asked. During dinner, Jake's father stood to make a toast. To family, to health, to gratitude. Ryan stood up unexpectedly. Can I add something? Everyone turned, surprised. I want to toast to humility, Ryan said, his voice steady. To learning lessons the hard way and being grateful for the teachers who delivered them, even when the lessons hurt. He looked directly at me. Especially to Emily. You could have destroyed me when you had the chance. You had every right to be cruel after how I treated you. But you weren't. You taught me something more valuable than revenge, you taught me dignity. He raised his glass. Thank you for not becoming what I was. The family was silent for a moment, then everyone raised their glasses. Soft applause rippled around the table. Jake squeezed my hand under the table, his eyes proud. Later, washing dishes in the kitchen, Chloe hugged me. You gave me my husband back, she whispered. The real version of him. Not the one pretending to be someone else. I hugged her back, feeling something like peace settle in my chest. That night, back in my apartment, Jake wrapped his arms around me from behind as I looked out the window. You know, he said softly, this apartment doesn't look so small anymore. I smiled, leaning back against him. It never was small, Jake. People just couldn't see the space I built myself, the space that mattered. I thought about everything that had happened. How Ryan's cruelty had pushed me toward an opportunity one might never have taken otherwise. How his mockery had fueled my determination to prove my worth, not to him, but to myself. My tiny apartment had become the foundation for something bigger, not just a property business, but real confidence. Real understanding of my own value. "I'm proud of you," Jake murmured into my hair. "For how you handled everything. You could have been vindictive. Instead, you were just yourself." I turned to face him. Being myself was the best revenge possible. We stood there in comfortable silence, surrounded by my thrifted furniture and second-hand decorations. Nothing had changed physically about this space. But everything had changed about how I saw it. This wasn't a tiny apartment. It was my launchpad, my foundation, my proof that success isn't measured in square footage. It's measured in character, resilience, and the courage to build your own path regardless of who doubts you. 6 months later, I sat in Patricia and David's office signing papers for Summit Property Group's biggest acquisition yet, a 15-unit building that we'd completely renovate and reposition in the market. My name was printed clearly at the top of the contract, Emily Parker, co-owner. I thought about Ryan's words that had started everything. "You should stop wasting time with art and learn real estate like me." The irony was beautiful. He'd tried to make me feel inferior while standing in a building I partly owned. He'd mocked my tiny apartment while signing a lease that put money in my pocket. As I drove home that evening, I thought about what I'd tell my younger self, the girl washing dishes after Ryan's cruel comments, crying in her kitchen, feeling worthless. I'd tell her, the people who mock you today might be paying rent to you tomorrow. But more importantly, their words only have the power you give them. Build your life on your own foundation, not their opinions. When I walked into my apartment, my beautiful, small, perfect apartment, I smiled. He'd called it tiny. He'd meant it as an insult. But what he never understood was that it's not about square footage. It's about what you build inside those walls. And sometimes, the smallest spaces hold the biggest victories, not over others, but over the doubt that says you're not enough. I was enough. I'd always been enough. And my tiny apartment had been the perfect size all along for the dreams I built inside it.